Welcome to Morning Coffee and Part 5 of Job's Tragedies. Job had experienced loss, grief, and accusations, but now he is going to hear what God has to say about his suffering. The people often rely on the first impressions of each other. That doesn't give us an accurate picture as to who they really are. We have preconceived ideas about who people are and have our own impressions of who God is by our own personal experiences with Him. See, Job, he revealed his impression as to who he thought who God was, and his misconceptions were about to be corrected. As we go to Job 38, beginning in verse 1, says, Then the Lord answered Job out of the storm. He said, Who is this that darkness my counsel with words without knowledge? Brace yourself like a man. I will question you, and you will answer me. Where were you when I laid the earth's foundation? Tell me if you understand. Who marked off its dimensions? Surely you know. Who stretched a measuring line across it? On what were its footings set? And who laid its cornerstone? While the morning stars sang together and all the angels shouted for joy. Who shut up the sea behind doors when it burst from the womb? When I made the clouds its garment and wrapped it in thick darkness, when I fixed its limits for it and set its doors and bars in place, when I said, This far you may come and no farther, here is where your proud waves hate. See, God appeared to Job in a whirlwind and spoke directly to him. Now, God's tone seems to be severe as he put Job in his place. God's first words to Job, was not to defend his decisions, but to question Job's understanding. And Job was innocent of any hidden sin, but that didn't justify his complaints against God. God even told Job to brace himself for what he was about to say. See, Job's claims against God was based on his limited understanding to how God works. God reminded Job who was divine and who was merely nothing more than a human. Job wasn't there when God measured the dimensions and laid the foundations of the earth, and God created the stars and the sea. God explained to Job that it was he who was the one who locked the sea behind the barred gates. Now we're going to continue in Job 12. Have you ever given orders to the morning or shown the dawn its place, that it might take the earth by the edges and shake the wicked out of it? The earth takes shape like clay under a seal. Its features stand out like those of a garment. The wicked are denied their light, and and their upraised arm is broken. Have you journeyed to the springs of the sea, or walked in the resources of the depth? Have you have the gates of death been shown to you? Have you seen the gates of the shadow of death? Have you comprehended the vast expanses of the earth? Tell me if you know all this. What is the way to the abode of light, and where does the darkness reside? Can you take them to their places? Do you know the paths to their dwellings? Surely you know, for you were already born. You have lived so many years. Sounds like God's really putting it to Job, doesn't it? Job's complaints were based on his knowledge of God's character and on the nature of his justice. The God questioning of Job, poor Job's limited understanding of heart. And it's God who commands each morning to appear. It is God's authority and his power that causes the sun to rise, that floods the world with light, the light that exposes the evil doers and causing them to just scatter. And God holds authority over what happens in the moral realm as well as the physical. And he is the judge over all things. If Jude knew so much, then he would know where the light and the darkness come from. God's purpose was to compare his infinite perspective to Job's limited perspective. Now we're going to go to Job 26 or 39:26. Does a hawk fly by your wisdom and spread his wings toward the south? Does the eagle soar at your command and build his nest on high? He dwells on a cliff and stays there at night. A rocky cage is his stronghold. From where he seeks out his food, his eyes detect it from afar. His young ones feast on blood, and where the slain are, there he is. See, God challenged Job to understand the hawk's instinct. Was it Job's wisdom that taught them when to migrate and when to stay? Absolutely not. That is entirely in God's control. Now, God also mentioned the eagle's wisdom in building its nest high enough that it could use its strength to look for food. Did Job teach him that? Of course not. Because only God can give them that much wisdom. Have a tiny glimpse of God's infinite wisdom. I mean, that should build our faith in our confidence in Him. And faithless questions we ask shows our lack of understanding, not God's. We will continue in Job 40, beginning in verse 1. The Lord said to Job, will the one who contends with the Almighty correct him? Let him who accuses God answer this. Then Job answered the Lord, I am unworthy. How can I reply to you? I put my hand over my mouth. I spoke once, but I have no answer. Twice, but I will say no more. Then the Lord spoke to Job out of the storm. Brace yourself like a man. I will question you and you will answer me. Would you discredit my justice? Would you condemn me to justify yourself? Do you have an arm like God's? And can your voice thunder like this? Then adorn yourself with glory and splendor and clothe yourself in honor and majesty. Unleash the fury of your wrath. Look at every proud man and bring him low. Mm-mm. See, God encouraged Job's response. Did Job still want to argue with God? Job realized his words were very insufficient. He spoke, but then he decided, no, I need to keep my mouth shut. But Job doesn't admit that God is right and he is wrong. He doesn't even apologize for what he had said against God. Only that he will not reiterate his case, that his criticism of God is still there. See, regardless of Job's thoughts and his feelings, he was humble in the presence of God. And God is all powerful and all knowing, and we could never understand completely his decisions that he made. In Job's mind, he didn't deserve anything that had happened to him. And so, therefore, God must have done something wrong. Really? God confronted Job, asking him, will you discredit my justice and condemn me to prove yourself right? No. Who other than God has the right to condemn and give punishment? We wonder why bad things happen to us because, we didn't deserve it, right? I mean, we even question God as to why things are happening to us because we struggle to understand God's eternal perspective. But we can get into God's presence and read his words and to be encouraged and to give us hope. And now we're going to go back into Job, beginning in verse 12. Look at every proud man and humble him. Crush the wicked where they stand. Bury them in all the dust together. Should their faces in the grave? then I myself will admit to you that your own right hand can save you. See, God sharply called on Job to show his glory, honor, and majesty. To let his anger go against those who abuse justice and to seek after the weak. God described his power so that Job would recognize his own limitations and trust him. So when things feel unfair, they don't make any sense. And you know, at that time we can turn to God, our all-knowing God, who holds justice right in his hands. We can't see the future, but God can. And so he knows how things are going to play out, and we can trust in that. And as we experience trials in our lives, we don't understand that we can use our faith in God, knowing that he is faithful, he is just, and he cares for us. He is always there for us. We do not have the power to make things right, but we can have peace and strength in the midst of our trials, even if we don't know the reason for it, and that should be enough for us. His grace is enough. Amen. Won't you join me next week for part 6 of Job's suffering? And that will be the final part of the series of Job. Thank you so much. I love you all. And until next time.